So this might be a little controversial, but Gotham wasn't great. Hello everybody, welcome back to Metal and Antiquity. My name is Teray, and today we're going to be talking about what was probably the messiest show ever, Gotham. One important detail I do want to make very, very clear before I get into kind of going into the analysis of the show is that I actually never finished watching Gotham. I got about part of the way through the very beginning of the first half of season 5, and then I lost track of it and had to stop. Actually, was it season 4? Season 4 or season 5, somewhere around there. I was in school at the time and I really couldn't devote my energy to watching it. Plus that was also around the time Hulu stopped working on my computer and I couldn't log in anymore, so I kind of had to quit. But I want to talk about everything up to where I got to and then everything I know about what happened after that point. But first I want to get into how the show is structured, and that is, it is a big jumbled mishmashy mess of just a bunch of Batman things that they put into the same show, and we're like, hey, maybe this will work. And then also Jada Pinkett Smith was there, who plays one of my favorite characters, Fish Mooney. Regardless of what's going on in her life right now, Fish Mooney was a badass, and that's just how it is. Either way, the first season was really good. I really enjoyed the first season, but as we got a little bit further, as they started adding in more things, I feel like they rushed a lot of things unnecessarily, especially the introductions of a lot of the villains, particularly Ivy, I think was a big contentious thing that they did in the show. But the structure of the show, I think, is one of the biggest flaws because it was really all over the place. It felt like there was a lot of bouncing back and forth, and a lot of things happened too early. There were too many fake outs in regards to who was going to be the Joker. And I think that really set the show back in regards to viewers and the fan base being like, okay, how am I supposed to work with this when there's no definitive story, no guarantees about anything? And I think that is probably, those are the two biggest flaws in the show, are the awkward pacing, because there's a lot of really weird time skips that happen that are never really explained, and the weird way they introduced a lot of the villains. And in particular, the biggest one that bugged me was how they kept aging Ivy up. I thought that was really weird and kind of unnecessary they did that, and it made very little sense to me in regards to the pacing of the show. If they can keep Selena the same age, why is it necessary to suddenly age Ivy up so far? I think those are the biggest flaws in the show that I personally was able to identify, because I think if they had fixed the pacing and if they hadn't rushed in weird spots, they would have been fine. But those are choices that they made, and those are choices that 100% set the show back, at least for me as a viewer of that particular show. That's kind of really my biggest dissection of it, in regards to structure and plot. I do want to get into breaking down the cast, because I think the casting, if you want to look at the show objectively, the casting is one of the best parts of the show and how the show was run. So now that I've gone over what I think the flaws are, let's get into the casting element of it, because I have a lot of opinions on the casting. Diving right into going over the cast, which honestly the casting is the highlight of the entire show for me. Starting with obviously our lead, Jim Gordon, played by Ben McKenzie, and Harvey Bullock, played by Donald Logue. The comedic chemistry between the two of them is incredible. Right off the bat, you get it, and right off the bat, they're funny. And I think that's so important, especially when you have two characters that are essentially buddy cops in something that's not necessarily a buddy cop thing. But Donald Logue's Harvey Bullock is probably one of the best parts of any season. His moments are always hilarious, and he always gets these really good one-liners in, and I love him so much. God, Harvey was such a good character. Ben McKenzie does such a good job as Jim Gordon. He has the voice down, and his facial expressions in some of the weirder moments. I think one of my favorites is when he punches Jerome's face off in the carnival scene, and I think season 3, one of those two. But that was just, his face when he does that was hilarious, and it wasn't a funny moment, but his facial expression made it into a really hilarious moment. Next we have Morena Baccarin, Ben McKenzie's wife, and also alumni of Firefly, which is... Ben McKenzie scored, man. That's not fair. Some of us are gay out here. But Morena Baccarin as Lee, incredible. The duality of her character and how that develops through the show is something that I thought was really cool, and turning her in from this very steadfast, adventurous woman to kind of with the Tetch virus, and then her development into kind of almost, I'd call her an anti-hero at that point. But I really appreciated how her journey, it kind of works and where that takes her, and I thought that was really fun to watch her character change and develop to fit into this really harsh world of Gotham that they live in. Next we have David Mizzou as young Bruce Wayne. When I tell you that kid is definitely needs to play Batman later, I 100% on God mean that. That kid needs to play Batman at some point, because as soon as he's old enough, like, he needs to be in the suit. Put him in the suit as soon as he hits 18, slap that kid in the suit. I don't care. I want him in the suit one day, because his portrayal of Bruce processing that trauma and then using that to further his goals as Batman was so incredible to watch. He really encapsulated the spirit, and it felt really familiar. How he played Bruce Wayne felt familiar, which is really, really cool, because it's not often that you can say that. It felt like this perfect balance between like all the good Batman we've had from like the late 80s, specifically Michael Keaton's Batman and Christian Bale's Batman. It kind of felt like that perfect balance between the two. And I really, really appreciated that about how he portrayed Bruce Wayne. And honestly, 10 out of 10, incredible performance. And I cannot wait to see what he does and if they let him put on the suit later as an adult. Next we have Cameron Monaghan, who for me is probably one of the highlights of the show, because Cameron Monaghan plays Jerome and Jeremiah Valeska. And Joker material. 100%. And I mean, seeing him come off of Shameless and into kind of falling right into that role of Jerome and Jeremiah, and later Jeremiah, was amazing. He is so incredibly talented, and honestly the vocal talent of this cast is incredible, because character voices are hard, and when you have a character voice like Jerome's and like Jim Gordon's, it's really hard on your vocal cords, and honestly him and Ben McKenzie were phenomenal with that as well. But just how he physicalized the character physically was incredible, and you can tell that he paid attention to all of the Jokers in the past. But Jerome specifically feels a lot like a mix of like Jack Nicholson and Cesar Romero, and Jeremiah felt like a mix of some of the more comic book or the animated series Batman, and very much felt a little bit like Heath Ledger. And that was also a really familiar performance for both of them, because you can see elements of all these different Jokers that we've seen, all the different iterations in his portrayal. And I thought that was really incredible about how he pulled all of those different things and then compartmentalized them for Jerome and for Jeremiah. Absolutely incredible. And then we have Robin Lord Taylor and Corey Michael Smith, who play Oswald Cobblepot and Edward Nygma respectively. The chemistry alone is there, and that made part of it so, that's what makes them so good together, is the chemistry is impeccable. It's so amazing. And how they kind of portray this journey of Penguin realizing he's in love with Edward, and the rejection and the back and forth that happens is amazing. And then we have Aaron Richards and Jessica Lucas as Barbara and Tabitha. I just really liked the relationship they had. I love that they had queer relationships in this version, and I really appreciated that. Being a young queer person myself, I liked seeing these queer relationships being shown in a comic book space that is usually more straight, white, male reserved, particularly where the space for Batman is concerned. And I think that is one of the biggest issues with the Batman fandom and comic books as a whole, but that is a subject for a very different video. But their relationship was really, honestly, kind of cute. The jealousy aspect of it, because of Tabitha's relationship with Butch, played by Drew Powell, who's also incredible. I could have done without that, but honestly, I love the relationship. This really awkward polyamorous relationship that sprung up between the three of them was really interesting to watch. But I just like the idea of there being a WLW relationship in that comic book space that's not hypersexualized for the male gaze. Anyway, next we have Benedict Samuel as Jervis Tetch, simply because as soon as I saw the character, me being a big Alice in Wonderland nerd as a kid and still now, I thought it was hilarious. And Benedict is so funny as Jervis. Just with these, because Jervis says the most out-of-pocket things, so to hear and to do it all in rhyming is just hilarious. And I can only imagine the memorizing of Jervis's dialogue was probably just, okay, how many things can we make rhyme with a particular word? But he was just so funny, and he did such a good job kind of capturing that character in that role, and I really appreciated that, and how much obvious dedication he had to playing Jervis correctly. Also, just the relationship between the three J's, Jervis, Jonathan, and Jerome, was impeccable. And lastly, we have my favorite character in the whole show, who did not get nearly enough screen time for me to be happy. Anthony Carrigan's portrayal of Victor Zsasz. I love Victor Zsasz. Just on principle, as soon as he showed up the first time, I was like, that's it. That's my favorite character. I love him. Him and Alfred, played by Sean Pertwee, who a lot of the Whovians will know, are fantastic. And I love Anthony Carrigan. He's hilarious. He's so funny. And his portrayal of Victor Zsasz was just so off the wall. And it was what made that character so great and so entertaining to watch. I am very excited to see him and Bill and Ted Face the Music, hopefully coming out later this summer. I'm just really excited to see what he does as Death's son in that particular movie, because that is who he's playing. He's playing Death's son. It's gonna be great! And eventually I will do a video on Bill and Ted, the series, but that will be for serial scrutiny, not one-off wonders. Anyway, the cast obviously is such a huge highlight of the show, and I think that's part of why the show was able to run for 5 seasons, despite the pacing and those issues. But the cast is amazing, and if you watch the show for any reason, watch it because of the cast. Now that I've done breaking down, obviously, the best parts of everything about the show, let's get into final thoughts. So Gotham is obviously a hot mess. I think we can all agree that the show was done a little funny, and I think they weren't expecting to get as much airtime as they did, because they did end up with, I believe, 5 seasons running from 2015 to 2019. I don't think they were anticipating that, and I think that's part of why the pacing ended up so weird in certain places with certain characters. But regardless of the pacing, which is an issue that you can kind of laugh off and make a bit of fun of if you're watching the show, if you watch it for any reason, watch it for the cast, because my God, the casting was just so incredible. Everyone really pulled out all the stops in regards to playing these iconic characters. Some of them we haven't seen on screen in live action either ever, or it's been years, especially with characters like Two-Face, Riddler, and Poison Ivy, who no one's seen on live action on screen since the Joel Schumacher Batman movies, which are the reason why we almost didn't get Christopher Nolan's Batman franchise in 2005. But the cast is just so good that they make it really easy to look past all of the other issues with the show. I mean, just because everyone does such an incredible job, and like the people I named specifically are really just kind of highlights, in my opinion at least, to the show. They're really a credit to the characters that they play, and I really appreciated the effort and all the work they put in. But if you're somewhat of a Batman purist, I really wouldn't recommend Gotham at all. I'd recommend maybe watching like a couple of like the highlight episodes. Obviously episode 1 I'd recommend because it does cover the murder of Martha and Thomas Wayne. Season 1 episode 16, which is the introduction of Jerome, is a favorite of mine, The Blind Fortune Teller, because that one specifically you really get to see something that we came to expect from Dominic Monaghan's characters in the show. But if you're really like a strict purist, I really wouldn't recommend it because it's not going to be your cup of tea, and I can tell you that right now. Even as someone who's not really a Batman fan, I already know that. I know that much about the show from how much of it I've watched. And watching it as it premiered. So that about wraps us up for Serial Scrutiny. And I will see everybody tomorrow for Socio-Political Smackdown. Bye.